Okay, so this is the KubeBuilder meeting for September 11th in 2019. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. And so don't say anything that you don't want to be put down for all time in perpetuity, etc. All right, so with that out of the way, looks like there's a couple things on our agenda today. So the first one, I think Joe has an item about Kubernetes version bumps in controller runtime. So Joe, why don't you start us out?
Sure. So since we released 0.2.0 for controller runtime, it's still on 1.14 Kubernetes versions. So I saw that there was a PR for 1.15 that was closed like last week or the week before. Whoever created it decided they weren't going to continue supporting it. So I basically duplicated that and submitted a new PR last night. So I'm hoping we can basically do that version bump soon and make another release as a result. It looks like everything all passes and runs. It didn't seem like it caused any breaking changes, so it looks fairly straightforward. Then with 1.16, which is not released yet, there's another PR that someone else opened that basically does the same thing for 1.16. So I don't know. We probably want to go from 1.15 to 1.16, but I just wanted to kind of bring this up and talk about it to see if anyone else had thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. I think we should be able to merge that soon, shortly, hopefully today or tomorrow, depending on timing.
Do we remember, so I was looking at the old PR and there was some concern about one of the dependencies. I didn't notice any issues. Was there anything that you can remember from the previous PR that wasn't ready to be merged? Or was it just...
I think the main concern was just whether or not, so like we expose a number of types from ClientGo and API machinery in our public API. And so the concern was just, did any of those types change in incompatible ways? So like, did any of the interfaces that we rely upon in our public API change? If the answer is no, then we're fine.
And when you say change, do you mean like a compiler error would happen? Or do you mean we need to go and look at everything and see if the semantics of an interface changed?
I mean like a compiler error for the most part. Usually the semantics of the interfaces don't change. Technically, both of those would be a breaking change. Checking for the semantics on everything, is not an easy task. But usually the things we have to worry about are just like a method had a parameter added or something like that. And sometimes those aren't caught by our tests for various reasons.
Okay.
Because they're like ancillary changes in like the definition of the interface that we receive, and we're using like mostly the defaults, but technically it would be a breaking change or something like that. So it's just good to check those if we can. I had some tooling once upon a time to check it. Usually it's not an issue, but I just wanted to make sure. I think there's also tooling in the Go standard library that you can use.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Buried that the Go authors use. I had wanted to try to get a run of that in before we merged, but we kind of we'd have to revive that if
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I can take a look at that.
That would be super awesome.
Does this also force other dependencies to use 1.16 in this case, right? Like it's not enough for just KubeBuilder, but like other libraries might expose breaking changes, right? Everyone has to move everything now. Any KubeBuilder generated operator has to be entirely on 1.16 now.
If they want to use the 0.2.0 of controller runtime.
Or
Well,
it would be
or
zero
whatever.
dot,
Yeah.
yeah, 0.2.2 or whatever.
Right. So I think that kind of Justin was going to bring up the same question I was probably going to ask next. I don't know if this is where he was going as well, but I was going to ask if we want to have some sort of compatibility matrix where we backport patches to certain releases to specific Q versions while they're in support windows, or if that's something we don't want to do yet, because that does introduce a large support burden on the maintainers, but is, I think, something that will help adoption of this in my mind. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but just throwing it out there.
So I have henceforth, I think I've written about this a little bit before. I have henceforth not been a fan of this idea, just because, as you mentioned, the maintenance burden. But in most things, like in most things, I'm willing to be convinced otherwise.
in this case, it would be somewhat difficult given our versioning, right? What version number would we bump?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like we'd have to almost have like two version numbers potentially, which is kind of strange.
Could we just do 030 with this? And
Yeah, I mean we could do 030. It's not a so far the way we've been doing pre 1.0 semver is which is kind of pseudo undefined, is by shifting things over basically. So the middle version number becomes the major version, and the last version number becomes both the minor and the patch version. And so like generally we've been saving things like 0.2 to 0.3 for an indication of a breaking change in our API. And so we've been trying to just be like, every Kubernetes release is a major update. Anything might break kind of thing. It might be something we have to consider. And if a Kubernetes release actually does break something in our public API, then we're going to have to do that anyway. But
I think that would be a good thing to visit when we have reached 1.0. Like right now, I think marching towards 1.0 looks like a more priority than supporting all the other versions of Kubernetes.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I was sort of proposing just do 030, because then you don't have to worry about it, right? Like just looking at this PR, there is a code change in ClientGo which is exposed, right? Which means we have to make a change in controller runtime around the serializer, and it's a simple change, but it's still a breaking change.
Oh, okay.
is there actually a breaking change in our public interface?
No, in the ClientGo dependency, it looks like a serializer direct codec factory change to serializer without conversion codec factory.
Okay, but that I don't think we expose those as part of public.
Right, but anyone that's calling ClientGo.
Anyone that's calling serializer is going to
potentially
have issues.
There are likely others, right? Those are just the ones we hit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was going to say, and as we all know, Go mods doesn't make it super easy to do things this way, right?
Well, it would. It's more of we choose not. We for various reasons, some of which have very good justifications. We chose not to go like full in to Go mods in Kubernetes, and so like that actually has caused us in controller runtime issues. So you would be able to do things like having two versions of ClientGo in parallel, if if ClientGo had fully embraced Go modules, and done like major version import paths like you're supposed to. But because we don't do major version import paths in Kubernetes, we can't have two versions in parallel. We can't have like the version we use for our internal mechanics and the version we have in our public API, for instance. And so that's just not going to work.
But couldn't an operator developer basically have a submodule that has a different Go mod file that declares a different?
Yes, potentially. You could do that, I believe. Yeah. So, all right, why don't we summarize people that have, let's start a new bug for this. And people that have strong opinions, basically, can we copy them over to the bug just to summarize so that we have like a good ledger of our thoughts and why we're doing this? Because this would be a change to our versioning policy. Since in the past we have said we would not bump major versions for unrelated changes. Where I'm saying unrelated is things that are not directly in the public API. So if we're going to change that, we should have a good record of this conversation.
So so I can make an action for myself. So just to repeat that, make sure I understand. The bug is about how we version controller runtime relative to the interfaces that controller runtime uses out of Kubernetes APIs, and also interfaces that other users might use that we indirectly depend on. Am I getting that right?
Yes. Yeah. Basically, how do we deal with stuff? How do we deal with changes to ClientGo, for instance, that are not technically part of our public API, but potentially likely to break people?
Right.
Which things like like Justin has a good point. Things like serializer, especially for more advanced use cases, are potentially likely to break people. And now for my time as a broken record. And then at someday we'll figure out how to solve this in a more robust manner from the Kubernetes side.
Okay. I think that's it for me on that one, at least.
All right. I think the next item is Justin's talking about plugin support. So Justin, why don't you?
Yes, there is a PR which is up there. I felt like we discussed it, maybe we didn't. But anyway, there is a PR which I think is probably in good shape as an initial implementation in KubeBuilder. It is more of a statement of intent of how we will develop these things. But the model is there. It's in process, but it is designed to be easily extractable to be out of process. And we're just sort of doing it as a development thing. I added it based on feedback, some fixes for typos, thank you, and a README. And currently it is blocked behind an environment variable feature flag, which is, I'm sure we can debate the naming. And if we only debate the naming, I'll be very happy. But if people have feelings, then please do have a look. I have a link. I have linked it in the agenda, but it is number 943 in KubeBuilder.
Yep, definitely take a look at that if you're interested in the plugins. As Justin noted, bear in mind that we do eventually intend this to be the out-of-tree plugin model. We just want to have kind of a tightly coupled interface that people won't immediately start depending on to iterate a little bit first and make sure everything's all set. I propose that the environment variable must contain things from the emoji section of the Unicode specification.
Everyone should learn how to do that because I have no idea how to do it. So I look forward to learning.
Does anyone have any immediate comments here?
I think it's been a little bit since I looked at it, but I think the one comment I had is that there were some other use cases that we had talked about, not with you, Justin, but like SDK and Sully, about also making plugins that support changing other files, not just Go files. So like Dockerfile and Makefile. So I think that's probably something that could be added probably without much trouble based on what I remember.
So actually, yes, you can, in your plugin, you are passed a model of the universe, which is like the inputs and all the files we are generating. You can remove files, you can change the contents of files, you can add files at will. So even in the add-on, we have an example of this where we generate some YAML files.
Okay, cool.
So if anything, it's a little too haphazard right now, and that it's like the only way you can identify a file today is by, well, the primary way you would identify a file right now is by path, which feels a little bit like that's not probably what we want to do, but certainly the functionality is there, and I think this is, the interface is, I'd actually argue we can continue to use the same interface even if we extract it to an out of tree model, because the model is you take a bunch of YAML in and you send a bunch of YAML out. So hopefully like extracting this to a separate binary will be the same. So if this interface does not work for you, then please let me know. I actually think we should probably prototype both of them in tree if we have doubts. But I will bow to y'all about that.
So what I would encourage from the operator SDK side is if you can once this merges, take it, start seeing what it looks like to add the entry operator SDK plugin for the changes you all need to make. Make sure it's like doable, and it doesn't you don't hit a major roadblock or have to do like backflips or cut yourself in half in order to do this properly, and report back.
Yep, that sounds reasonable. And the PR that Camilla put up yesterday about the Dockerfile updates, maybe there'll be an opportunity to use the plugin model for more Dockerfile and other customizations that we're thinking about. So we can talk about that more in that PR.
Okay.
The other question I had, Justin, is it looked like to use the add-on, you always have to pass, or to use the pattern, you always have to pass a pattern flag. Do we want to have some mechanism of embedding the pattern in the project file so that a project can follow a pattern always, and the KubeBuilder CLI can understand that?
That is potentially a great idea. I'd say for the use case which I was building, the pattern is per resource rather than per project. But obviously, mixing them is would be surprising. But I think that sounds like a great idea. I can try to do it, or we can try to do it separately when we have a use case, I guess.
I like that idea. I think we should, because this is behind a feature flag and everything, let's get parts merged incrementally. So merge what Justin has, and then we can merge a follow-on PR to go based off of the feature flag stuff, and get it to the point incrementally where we think we're good to go, as opposed to trying to do it all in one PR, because then you just get the PR that never ends. And I think we've all been there.
Yeah, totally agree.
Does the pattern flag allow you to specify multiple patterns? What if I wanted to compose multiple different plugins together?
Sorry. The pattern flag does not, but the chain, you could chain, in theory, you could chain plugins together. So obviously it's not implemented, but there's no reason you can't put them model in, model out, model in, model out in a pipe as long as you want, a pipeline as long as you want.
Okay, perfect.
that's another good thing to just like for us to think about just as we go forward as an additional thing. All right. If nobody else has any comments on that, I think we have one more thing. And yes, I do appreciate the table flip emoji in the middle of the plugins environment variable. All right, Joe, I think you had one more thing about the KubeBuilder operator SDK integration plan.
Yep. So, Sully, I think you asked last week or the week before, can we put up a doc that basically says what we plan on doing and kind of what we talked about out in San Francisco. So I wrote something up, have a PR open for basically our plan to integrate KubeBuilder and SDK. So definitely whoever's interested in that, take a read, comment, let us know what you think. Really, that's about it for that. If you're not aware of the plan to do the KubeBuilder and Operator SDK integration that we've been talking about, basically what it is we realize that SDK and KubeBuilder are doing substantially the same things for Go operators. SDK has one implementation and one CLI. KubeBuilder has a different implementation with a different CLI, but they're both scaffolding out Go operators that use controller runtime. So the idea is like, let's stop duplicating all that effort. And the plan is for SDK to start making use of KubeBuilder more for Go operators. And then we'll start upstreaming all of the Go code that is currently in SDK that can be used more broadly by any Go operator developers back up into KubeBuilder or controller runtime or controller tools, wherever it makes sense. So we've already gotten started on that. There's some examples of those things that we're doing. And then part of the discussion is also with this pattern prototype. So for things like OpenShift specific customizations that we might want to do in Red Hat OpenShift land, we might have a plugin that OpenShift users can use with KubeBuilder that can customize a project to do OpenShift specific things. And then the last idea is there's a lot of documentation that we have that overlaps quite a bit, so we're going to try to unify the documentation as well.
If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to ask them here or ask them on the issue. We have a project tracking board for immediate tasks that need to be accomplished as part of the upstreaming effort. So if you'd like to help out, you can take a look at the project tracking board. If anything's not clear, or if it's not clear if something like is a good first issue, or there's not a lot of detail because a bunch of the cards were created kind of in rapid succession, just feel free to ping on the card and one of us will come and give some more detail. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to talk about? All right. If not, I'll see y'all in a month and have a good Wednesday.
Thanks.
Thank you.